So today we'll talk about the development of what we most commonly know as Zen Buddhism. These are the meditative schools of Buddhism. Remember jhana, one of the categories into which the means meditation. It was one of the three categories into which the steps of the Eightfold Path are often divided. Again, it means meditation, and when the Sanskrit jhana moved to China, it was transliterated as chan. And then when it moved to Japan, chan was transliterated as Zen. So these are the same word, culturally transmitted into different regions to describe the meditative schools of Buddhism. So in the U.S., we know this tradition primarily as Zen. And what does that tell us? It tells us that we got our Zen, we got our Buddhism primarily from Japan. There was a Zen boom in the U.S. in the 1950s, and that boom had its roots a little earlier. Japanese Zen Buddhist monk Shakyu Soyen visited America in 1893, where he spoke at the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago. Quite an event, worth looking into. His talks made it into print in 1906, and this helped to set the stage for the Japanese Zen monastics who would come under attack in Japan by the Shinto nationalists in the 1800s. And these Japanese Buddhists arrived in America in the early to mid-1900s and were a wee bit critical of Japanese institutions under which they'd been oppressed. And what they met in America was the early stages of a kind of U.S. cultural anti-institutionalism. So in the U.S., the two main institutional branches of Japanese Zen, which we'll get to a little bit later, but they're Rinzai and Soto, two main branches of Japanese Zen. They sort of stepped outside of their own institutional boundaries in the context of the United States, and they were often taught together. In the 1950s, the American literary and cultural movement of the Beat generation, became enamored with and then popularized the teachings of Zen. And in the U.S., teachers have often taught Soto and Rinzai together, intermixed, right? So American Zen is primarily a movement of lay people who practice a monastic discipline. And in the late 20th century, Zen institutions in the U.S. were passed down to native-born teachers, to Americans. The shared goal of Zen practitioners across the board, regardless of this cultural development, is immediate insight, or enlightenment such as Gautama achieved under the Bodhi tree. That's what they're looking for. What we'll look at today is the beginning of this tradition. How did it start? Sometime in the 5th or 6th century CE, Bodhidharma, who's pictured here, a dim, legendary figure, left India and went east to China. He was a South Indian prince, probably born into the Kshatriya caste, as was the Buddha, and he became a Buddhist monk, made his way to South China, and then traveled north in China. The story has it that he meets and shocks the Emperor Wu, then goes to the Shaolin Temple, where he finds monks who cannot meditate well. They have an inability to focus, and they are lazy. That's what he sees. Now, for Bodhidharma, the spirit, the mind, and the intellect form an indivisible whole, and this means that mind alone cannot reach enlightenment. The body is part of this complex, and if the mind is to reach enlightenment, the body will play a large role in getting it there. This point was obvious to him as he watched monks trying to meditate and falling asleep, right? Their bodies were a hindrance to the realization that their minds sought. So here we have a classic image of Bodhidharma, and you might notice that his eyes are very big, and it shows up in a bunch of different forms. This one's from the 15th century, but you can see these it's kind of a formalized image at this point. His eyes always look like this, a little shaky at the top and very big, right? He seems to have no eyelids. And there's a reason for this, okay? So when the monks complained to him that they could not keep their bodies awake for long enough to allow the mind to reach awakening, he looked at them, and he grabbed his own eyelids, and he ripped them off, and he threw them onto the ground, and up sprouted a tea plant, whose leaves would help the monks to stay awake. And so the story goes, Bodhidharma brought tea to China. But the tea wasn't enough, and the monks remained lax in their practice, skeptical in their belief that Bodhidharma could do better, and grumpy in their demands of him. So he retreats to a cave, where he spends 9 years facing a wall in complete and deep meditation. During that 9 years, depending on the story, his legs atrophied, 1 pound of flesh froze and fell off. And a student, one consistent narrative throughout the story says a student who's figured here, whose name was Huike, comes to the mouth of the cave, realizing Bodhidharma's vast accomplishment, and chops off his own arm, which you see him holding here, to prove his dedication and to beg Bodhidharma to return and teach. So he does. He returns to Shaolin, where the monks were becoming better at meditation but remained physically unfit for enlightenment. They're still lazy, right? So in keeping with his claim that mind alone cannot reach enlightenment, and to give the monks a physical means of meditation, he introduces to them a series of exercises that have since come to be known as Kung Fu. So this is a picture of the Stupa Garden at the Shaolin Monastery. The Shaolin Monastery, many of you have probably heard of, which has become famous primarily for its association with Kung Fu or martial arts in China. So, just keeping it all together here, Bodhidharma comes to China, and he brought with him Chan Buddhism, the meditative school of Buddhism, Tea, to help keep the mind awake for meditation, and Kung Fu, to bring the body into line with the aspirations of the mind. So according to the tradition that has grown from him, Bodhidharma is the 28th patriarch of Buddhism. Now the roots here are traced back to the Buddha himself, who in a famous sermon, he got everyone's collected and they're ready to listen, and the Buddha doesn't say anything. He remains silent, and he holds up a single flower. And the monks were all confused, sort of looking around like, oh, this guy's, maybe he's lost it, right? All except for this one monk named Mahakashyapa, who smiles. And so for the meditative tradition, Mahakashyapa at that moment received a direct transmission of truth from the Buddha, a transmission of mind to mind, and a transmission which has continued through the generations. And Bodhidharma, 28th patriarch of Buddhism, is the first patriarch of Chan, or Zen Buddhism. As the tradition grew and spread to Japan, a question that came to define the tradition was, should one sit still and meditate, or should one focus the mind on a really tough problem to sort of break its links to its assumptions, right? So when Chan went to Japan in the 12th and 13th centuries and became Zen, this question itself created the split according to which the tradition developed. On the one hand, there was Rinzai, which can be characterized as rigid, martial, elite. These folks were like white-collar practitioners. They used koans, tough questions that are meant to break through the illusion of duality and lead to a momentary sort of breakthrough insight. And on the other hand was Soto, numerically the larger, established by Dogen in the 13th century. And it's sort of, if we had to sort of pigeonhole characterize it, we would say gentle. It's the gentle, rustic side of Zen, the more farmer, blue-collar side of Zen, and dedicated to practicing Zazen or Shikantaza, just sitting, right? They're not doing the hyper-intellectual koan thing. They're not trying to tease the mind out of everything. They're just sitting and watching their breath. Now, like I said, these two traditions have, in modern times, and especially in the West, been largely conflated. When what Zen across the board aims at is satori, or awakening, enlightenment, what the Buddha got, right? Satori, which is spelled like this, and has become the name of like snowboard companies and, I think a record label. But anyway, satori must be found in private by looking into one's own nature and actualizing non-duality. One cannot, and we've heard something like this before, one cannot simply think one's way into a realization that I and not I are in the end non-dual. One has to experience it, realize it in one's own experience of the world. And in large part because of this, Zen has developed both a sense of cosmic non-duality, right? There is no separation between the subject and object, between I and not I. And also, at the same time, Zen has developed a really keen, immediate aesthetic response to sensory reality, And so the next few images show some of the more popular ways in which this immediate aesthetic response is cultivated, or expressed in life. This is an image of a Japanese tea ceremony, a really carefully cultivated ritual that has, far less to do with drinking tea in a simple way than it does with ritualizing experiences of non-duality. And if you're interested in this, or just like both tea and Zen, and also some Taoism, and you need an easy summer read, I recommend to you the Book of Tea. Very good, by Okakura. I just really enjoyed this book. I thought it was a blast. Kakuzo. It's written in 1906. It's a little Taoist, a little Zen, and a lot of tea. It's quite fun. And now here's a bowl in the wabi-sabi style, a style cultivated by Zen creators, meant to relish in the beauty of the imperfection that is this life, right? The true perfection that lies within all things, far too often unseen because of our own expectations. So a whole aesthetic style of especially tea bowls, but other things have developed in this wabi-sabi style. And most of us are familiar with the Japanese rock garden, a sort of well-cultivated space of patterned pebbles. And again, and we'll turn to this in the next unit, you can see the Taoist influence here, but in this context, it's a way to physicalize meditation, something that has been at the heart of Zen since the time of Bodhidharma's Chan. And the last of these common practices for the day, Zen nature painting. This one's of plum blossoms, though they're often large-scale landscapes. The style is elegant, simple, but at the same time reflective of the lush and always changing, always burgeoning, disorganized perfection of the phenomenal world. The saying here, how can you expect to smell the fragrance of the plum blossoms unless you have felt the cold penetrate to your very bones? It's one of my favorite Zen sayings, and though I don't know its source, I do love it. The saying used to hang on in my teacher's office at UC Santa Cruz on a scroll with calligraphy and painted plum blossoms. If anyone knows the source, let me know. I've looked. I can't find it. But it reflects well this sense that in the world of Zen meditation, things change, things develop, and the change is part of one's experience of life. The Zen mind abides through these changes, aware of and accepting them, but focused always on the goal of enlightenment, right? Basho is a very popular Zen poet. Did a lot of haiku, and I recommend also to the Cold Mountain Poets if you're into a group of them. They're often published together. There's an edition called The Clouds Should Know Me by Now, which is Cold Mountain Poets. It's very good if you're into it. So we'll close with this series of pictures known as the 10 ox herding pictures. You can find many versions of them online. You can blow them up. It is a classic form with many narrative descriptions of the process they portray in detail. But in short, I'll tell you, these pictures show the development of the enlightened mind, or the development of the mind toward enlightenment. The ox here represents the mind, the enlightened mind, or the Buddha truth. And the man, he seeks it. He sees it. He chases it, he catches it, he rides it home, and he lets it go. And then there's emptiness, neither man nor ox, right? But then the man comes back to the world, and not only to the world, but in the last image, back to the city, to the hustle and bustle of embodied experience, but now awakened. For Zen, when one begins, the mountains are mountains, right? And then after much practice, the mountains aren't mountains anymore. Because non-duality fits in, and the mountains are me, or the mountains are my computer, or whatever, right? And realization comes. But then with awakening, the mountains are mountains again, because this is this life. So it is really this kind of change of the perspective in order to have a more awakened vision of the reality that we all experience. It's meant to bend your brain, to break down its attachment to conceptualization, to duality, right? Next time, we'll close out our unit on Buddhism by looking at two more Buddhist groups that have developed, the Pure Land Buddhists and Nichiren Buddhism.